And a federal judge this week has struck down a Biden administration migration policy that allowed the release of illegal aliens at the border, saying that it, quote, effectively turned the southwest border into a meaningless line in the sand. Well, that's what it's become under the Biden administration, where there's been over 1 million contacts with illegal migrants over the last year. And Jennie, I want to get your take on this. You have spent a lot of time reporting at the border. How bad is the situation? And tell us a bit about who's coming in, where they're coming from, and how the Biden administration is coping or not coping with this.
Right. So under the Biden administration, we've seen millions of illegal immigrants pour over the border. In fiscal year 2022, the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency had encountered 2.3 million. In just the first few months of fiscal year 2023, we've seen over 800,000 already. So they have heavily relied on this use of parole authority that the Attorney General of Florida had sued over to bring people into the country and to effectively release them. It's known as catch and release by some. And so this is a huge ruling. Now, I think we'll have to look to see if the Biden administration at all feels the need to appeal this, which I predict they might. I think it's very likely that they will. The judge has given them a very short period of time to scrap this program. It's something that they've heavily relied on to release many people. It is a really, really bad situation down there, as you highlighted. You see people from all over the world now. The globe is aware. They are aware that the border is open to them, that they will be released likely, even the single adults. It's not just families who are not kept in detention. The Biden administration has heavily relied on this program called Alternatives to Detention, which allows for them to be released with cell phones that track them. So that's been a big issue as well that the judge did speak about.
It's just amazing to me. And Melissa, what are your thoughts on this? Because the Biden administration has been not only actively missing in action, Kamala Harris, who's supposed to have responsibility for the border hasn't been there for 20 months. What could their political strategy here possibly be? Melissa?
Well, it looks like letting in at least roughly, the CBP actually says roughly 2,670 migrants they consider a day are getaways, is releasing a lot of illegal aliens into the country, some of which are hard to track, either because they break their parole or do not respond to orders to process their immigration papers. And, the border towns get overwhelmed. And so you have places like El Paso, places like Florida, which just could get completely overwhelmed, small towns that have to deal with an influx of immigrants. And this has, far-reaching consequences on our political landscape. I mean, both in terms of, whether illegals might be voting in some of these areas that they eventually settle in, or also in the sense that, people who are living in the border towns are now going to request for more restrictive immigration policies and therefore vote in a way that reflects that.
So, fascinating stuff, but I want to move on now to China, where tensions between China and the U.S. have started to boil over, with China's foreign minister coming out with quite a threat, saying that if the U.S. does not change its path, there will surely be, quote, conflict and confrontation. This would seem to be just further evidence that the Biden administration mishandled this Chinese spy balloon situation from the very start by, A, not shooting it down, so letting China get a win there, and then finally giving them the propaganda victory that they wanted. Melissa Chen, how is Biden going to navigate this now going forward after that 30 seconds of rapprochement they seem to have with Beijing? It's just back to square one, isn't it?
It is, and it's actually spiraling deeper into hostilities. Qin Gang, who is the newly minted foreign minister, actually came out saying that he's criticizing the all-around containment policies by the United States. And, the question is, when exactly did containment become a bad thing, especially when you consider other policy options that are available to the United States? I mean, we should, in fact, be containing, an authoritarian regime with expansionist goals. The U.S. has basically tried engagement for way too long. So, I'm all for containment.
Yeah. And Jennie Taer, I want to just ask you what your thoughts are on the diplomatic crisis with China, which seems to be ongoing. People I've spoken to here in Australia, security experts, believe there could be an invasion of Taiwan within 5 years. Do you think a Biden administration would be at all equipped to respond to such an action?
There's certainly been a war of words over Taiwan between China and the U.S. And as we've seen, there's been several top U.S. lawmakers actually travel to Taiwan, express on a bipartisan level support for Taiwan. But we haven't seen as much of that outspokenness coming from the top, from the White House, from the Biden administration. So if and when that happens, it's very unpredictable what could happen as far as how the U.S. will exercise its upper hand over China encroaching on Taiwan.